Right then, folks, let's get that started. All right then. This is Model Vaserlan or Model V. Model Vaserlan would have better SEO. I mean, if it's just known as Model V, then other things would come up. So this is just me building it out. Right then, to sort of see, and I'll answer questions. Any questions that come up, I will. Right. So some key ideas in this. One of the differences with Model G is Model G's got this thing of the social row and the personal row, where somebody is, for example, that the introverting functions are the ones used in the social role of, say, LII, which corresponds to TINX, INTP. And then it would have shifts in it as well. This sort of makes things, I was thinking about what to call these. So I was going to call that, one of the options was majority and minority. The field of consciousness, the focus of attention. And then I realized that it's not so much realized as took into account the dynamic nature of vertness. And so it's a case of, for the introverts, that's their default state. And for the extrovert, that's their default state. But the extrovert can introvert and the introvert can extrovert. In fact, I'm extroverting now. But I'm going to be switching in between when I then will suddenly consider what to put in this various places. So this will get my rationale. So yeah, situational. Yeah. So extrovert, situationally introvert. Introvert, situationally extrovert. And I think that's I think that matches up to what we see in real life. I have one viewer. Now, will this one viewer ask a question? So, with this arrangement, like, it should be easier to fill in the positions. If you know what the MBTI, say, let's have a look at, say, ESTJ. You know what the valued functions are in ESTJ, and for those positions will read as familiar: dominant, auxiliary, tertiary, inferior. So you know where to put T, E, S, I, N, E, and F, I. And then if I was to give you another bit of information and say, on the left, you have all of the club functions. And so if you're putting the functions in for an ST, then all of the sensing functions, SE and SI, and thinking functions, TE and TI, are going to be on the left in that nucleus. And if I was to say that if it's a profile of an extrovert, it's going to be all extroverted functions in the top, then that's enough information to be able to place all of the functions. So for ESTJ, you would go T-E-S-I. What am I pointing on there? Is it show up on? Oh, I don't think it shows up. Does it show up? Yes, it does. This is meant to be for the template, but I don't really want to fill this in. But T-E-S-I-N-E-F-I-S-T functions. This is, what other ST functions do we have? Well, we have TI and SE. And given that all these are extroverted, so that means SE goes there and TI goes there. And then we've got these ones here. And then we know that SI is there. No, we don't. NE is there. We know that NE is there. And which one is left? Well, probably contrarian alternative FE is going to be the one left there. And you've got FI there and TI there. Oh, what's left? Oh, NI. Right. So relatively easy to fill out. The things that it's worth developing on are the idea of Bside. So especially in terms of Bside NE in Guardians. So it's like this other side of their personality. So A side, B side comes from when they had vinyls, and the B side would just be just another song to put on the other side. And I don't really know. I'm not really saying. I'm not prepared to say that the home column is the A side of the personality, because that makes it look like the personality is only those top two functions, whereas that's not the case. But I am prepared to say that the B side is that other side of the personality. So they're sort of the inner, the other side of them. So for the NE in Guardians, you see it with Putin. I classify Putin as a KBN ISTJ. Don't let the counterphobic stuff fool you. He is a complete bean counter. He is cut the budget, cut the defense budget. So it's meant to be this huge hawk, but he's always like cutting the defense budget to balance the budget. And Russia has the lowest debt in the G20, and the lowest debt outside. There's like 2 or 3 tiny countries that are oil rich that have got a lower debt to GDP ratio. So there's 2 reasons why he's so fiscally sound. One is a natural temperament thing, because I think he's like ISTJ. I think he's a contender guardian. Also, if you look at him, reduced affect display. And I think it's the counterphobic stuff that makes him appear like he's doing these things that you are more stereotypical of ISTP. So I think you can see this B-side, what I call B-side NE. See, I wanted the term for super id, but I didn't want to use super id. I didn't want to use these Freudian terms for modulators. So I wanted a term for that column. I was going to call it home and away, home from home, country retreat, cottage. These are all the things I considered, and I thought, and I finally settled upon B-side. So you're getting a bit of B-side FE from me at the moment. So just trying to get these names, and I will fill out the explanations. So there's a few things which come together with this model. One is the arrangement of the strengths is consistent with 2 or 3 sources. One is it's consistent with the Model A idea of the id IMEs being strong, or the id functional positions being strong. So Model 8 is your club functions are in the ego row and in the id row. So I've got those together. And you've got a sort of a broad thing of decreasing strength as you go across, though not necessarily. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky as to what is stronger between the role function, the contrarian alternative, and the suggestible. It depends how often you're in that state. So there's a lot of sources coming together here. One of them is just my personal opinion and thinking, okay, I'm gonna rank these, and now we've got, and then there's a lot of evidence when Dario has been doing his keys to cognition functional development thing since probably before 2005, because he mentioned it in his book 8 Keys to Self-Leadership, and he said that, and I'm going to read a little bit out for you about what are the least preferred functions. And so this is now in his new book, The Magic Diamond. He also says something that you might find familiar with this channel, and this channel is the only channel that does it, and that is, what is it, page 4 something something. What was this? For example, for ISTJ, it is apparently more accurate to say SITX, where the TX indicates both TE and TI rather than SITE. There we go. Right. But, so what he did was he had all of this data, he had all of these people that take his keys to cognition test, keystocognition.com. And he got someone to analyze it, sort of an independent source. And it mentions it at the back of the book, I believe. Right. The CPA questionnaire. Right. There were 100, what's this? 129,350 persons. Right. Oh, so he now calls it the Cognitive Processes Assessment at keystocognition.com. And then he writes in the back of his book about usually what are the scoring preferences, and which one is most likely to be the 4th highest scorer, and such and such. But buy the book for that insight. But let's just say it's not inconsistent with this model. Anyhow, what I can do, though, is I'm happy to quote from his older book. But again, this is something which is super ego row in Model 8s. Role, and vulnerable. But his initial researches of his study. So again, because Dario likes to create a website to promote his book. So the Keys to Cognition test page was created to promote this book, 8 Keys to Self-Leadership. So, results from the study was people have an overall preference for either introverting or extraverting. So, here's a bit. For example, someone who most prefers introverted feeling will likely report moderate comfort with basic introverted intuiting. So, it's because it's your default state. And in your default state, you are still, you're thinking, you're feeling, you're intuiting, you are instincting. I call it instincting, not sensor. because the emotion is mixed up within it. So that was one of the findings. So default field of consciousness, that's also in another source which I will mention in future. So I have an idea for you. I have a question for you. If, say you've got an INTP resembler, so an LII resembler, a TINX resembler, an accommodative rational, and they're heavily in a state, and they're in a state of introversion a lot more often than a state of extraversion, then for that particular individual, when they're feeling, they're going to be using FI more. They're going to be in an FI state more than an FE state. It's like, because it's like, they're within their default field of consciousness is subjective rather than empirical. And so their feelings are going to be tinged with that subjectivity. So, whereas then you might get, well, does this other INTP, but then but you see, the thing is, to observe them, you are interacting with the INTP, and then when you are interacting with the INTP resembler, they're going to be in a state of FE rather than FI. So it's tricky. I'm in an FE state at the moment. I'm thinking 7 people are viewing. Right. I'm in a more extroverting state. I'm going to be, so, dynamics. Okay, here we go. This is something that matches modulators. And I'm going to bring something in about Model G. And what I'm going to do on my channel is call it Model G star, because I have a slight theoretical difference with Victor. So here we go. Processes paralleling the preferred process are the least preferred. So here we go. For example, someone who prefers introverted sensing and extroverted feeling, say an ESFJ, will most likely have least comfort with introverted intuiting and extroverted thinker, typical of, say, INTJ. Right, so the arrangement of this model is not data-driven, but it is data-consistent. And it's consistent with Model A in that regard, in terms of there's slight differences in terms of the difference from Model A in terms of functional strength. Dabbling and contrarian would be 2-dimensional, and suggestible and allergic would be 1-dimensional. But I think that in certain circumstances, suggestible could be stronger than contrarian. Depends on development. I'm peculiar because I'm a 6. 6 is, if you're a 6, the traits of the 6, ambivalence. That you're in a lot of like FI states with going towards role function when you are a 6. Or like a 6. The 5, more typically the way they separate themselves from their emotions is going to be probably less in FI. But disdained, right? So there's going to be variances with development. So there's that part of the arrangement. This arrangement also emphasizes the clubs. So, for example, and this will get on to my point now about Model G. So for INTP, I'm just going to put these in. just put these in for. Just put that in there. Oh no, that's that horrible font. Right. Let's put something in there. Right. Default field of consciousness. Oh, dabbling. What do I dabble in? I dabble in SI. Let's get that. That's not right, is it? Text color. Actually, yes. Make it that color because it's not. Actually, that's not right. That. So these are the little things you do when you do a model. You want a little. Let's make this bigger. Font size. Wicked big. That's not wicked big. It's not getting any bigger. That's very strange. You can see this, right? $78, right. Right, I'll make them 100. Oh, just 96. Right, SI. How thrilling, band. Right. What's this one going to be? Right, opposite, FI. Right, it's the contrarian alternative. Right. So if you go with the, that's strange. That's 96. That's Times New Roman. I like the Times New Roman. Right. So let's get the other ones here. Because this is meant to be the template file, so I don't really want to mess around with it. So there we go. Nice. Well, I'll just leave it like that. Backseat Driver, TE. I try to get colourful names that reflect how I see the position worker. So, all this stuff when we hear about, oh, INTPs aren't good at TE. Well, really? Well, there's something that they have to be good at. It's one of these development things. They don't like TE, but they've got to be good at it. Have to force themselves to be good at it. I'll give an example. How many INTPs are in science? Does anyone wish to take an antagonistic position to me and argue that there's no TE in science? Right. So INTP scientists using TE. Right. What have we got here? Opposite of any, SE. All right. SE. All right. Am I supposed to make that bloody? Is that Arial? 96. I still don't know why. Look at the differences in, like, why that's bigger. Right. Weird. Anyhow. Right. So there's a slight difference with Victor with Model G, but so he's got, but I don't think it is. Anyway, right. So one of the things I'm going to write in this model is the relationship between energy and information. So when you have extra information for how to solve a task, then it's easier for you to solve the task. If you have somebody else, say, who's solving the same task, but it's harder for them because they've got less competence around the task, and so they have to put more effort in. So that's one part of the equation. How much energy is expended to execute the task. So this is effort to effect ratio. and you want the lowest effort to effect ratio. So, and the other aspect is energy. So somebody could have more energy for something, but the energy that they spend is not spent very efficiently because they've got low competence for it. Whereas with, say, the backseat driver position, you got more information for it. You got more, so you can see it as a chore, but if you know it's going to be productive, then it's not just about energy. The amount of information changes how much energy is required. So, for example, yeah, this is a good example. So, first glance, if you were to look at Model G of, I'm going to show you ESTJ and ESFP. And I'm going to make the rather bold case that I'll try and fit them both in. I'll make the rather bold case that, if that's a word, if that's a phrase. I'll make the rather bold point that ESTJ, see, I've got to get it right now because I've got to, that's it, I'll go back to the Model A system rather than, right, hang on a minute, FI, TI, right. So I'm going to put TI there, and then I'm going to do ESFP. I'm going to show this on the camera. SE, FE, NE, TE, TI polar, and so there are these little things in Model G that these sort of get out of jail free cards. Right, NI, SI. So I'm gonna go to maybe that one. So you see here, if you look at this, you might say, because you've got, in Model G, you've got pessimum energy for these. But these are also very high in information. The more information you have for something, and it has it related to tasks. So you've got a pessimum level of energy for a task, but you've got high information. You have more know-how. It makes it easier. So, TI in ESTJ. I have someone. How many of you have seen Kristen on this channel? Kristen has been applying social benefit rings in her teaching. She has a very good ability of applying theoretical models in the real world. So I would say that she's got pretty darn good TI. Now, what I'm also going to do, though, is, because I want to be honest, is I'm not going to bang on about how bad TI is in ESFP, because I'm going to give a counterexample. So apparently, the Rob guy that I had on channel recently, who came up with attitudinal psyche, apparently he has ESFP preferences. So there goes to show you. So, so the question is, what do we mean by TI? But you can imagine if you've got a task before ESTJ and ESFP, and right, so based on this, also look at this, like you got to take other things into account. So, which of these types is more disciplined, ESTJ or ESFP? ESTJ. Right, so this is an external factor. So, but again, this is something that's coming from Keirsey. And so least energy for this function. Yeah, but if you're an ESTJ and you're disciplined AF, then you're going to be doing this function. But if you're an undisciplined ESFP, then you're going to be doing this less. But there are disciplined ones as well. So there are these other factors, the temperament factor. Anyway, what am I getting on to here? So my point is, if you're doing a task which is related to your break function, to do it competently, you've got to put a heck of a lot of effort in. So look, think about an INTJ that has to put a lot of thought just into basic social interaction stuff. And actually had that on the channel when I did I made a video on unlisted, because we were doing videos with Greta. And she's like she thinks she classifies herself as INFJ, but like she's got a really weak FE and admits she got really weak FE, and she's like going through thinking about and planning ahead what to do to talk to somebody, but it was for like what I would call routine FE stuff. This is not what INFJs are doing. It's like if they're thinking about, okay, how do I manipulate this ESTP person with like high level FE, not putting loads of effort into basic level FE. So you've got to put all of this extra effort into something because there's less competency there. But with the control function, with the ignoring function, you've got more competency. So you have to put less effort in. So that means it's less of a lift. So even though you don't want to do it, you can sort of see with certain functions, you can see, well, I might as well, because there is a big payoff to doing it. So, but that's why you've got these extra nuances in Model G that can sort of explain that arrangement. So it was like the extra information. So another one. So there's a slight difference there. But you see, Victor's position about that, he's put that information in there anyway about the high information. He wrote in his book 64. That was the working title. That's the title I knew it as. He put in his book that the least adequate result is in the break position. So again, but you expect. Oh yes, there's another reason why the club functions are strong, especially if you stick with the intuitives. All of those roles in Keirsey, an INTP resembler can do 4 roles in Keirsey, the 4 strategic roles, 4 strategic building roles. 2 of those roles are coordinating and 2 of them are constructing. The constructing role, so the role that Keirsey thought INTP was best at, designer, architect of structures and theories. Okay, he seems to have been right there. Also, next one, inventor. So it's like you have to like take these structures and sort of like have them work in the real world. So a little bit more extroverted, a little bit more extroverted thinking coming in there. You've got to take the plan and actually developing and prototyping project development, which in the military takes decades. Projects like the F-35 is not finished yet. It started in 1995. We've got concurrency at the moment. They're still testing it, even though they've actually done production. Concurrency is not a good idea because it means you find faults, and then you've got all these aircraft that you've already built, and then you've got to make those changes to those aircraft rather than spending about 10 years designing the aircraft, flying it, then spending about 15 years working on all the subsystems, and then having it go into. So it takes ages, and a jet engine takes decades as well. Well, I've lost my thread. Aircraft. I always get distracted by aircraft. No. What was I going on about? Somebody please write in the comments what I was talking about before I mentioned project development. Yes, the roles. So yes. So again, the TE stuff. There's if you look at the role of the inventor, you can sort of and think which functions are involved. You can go, yeah, the inventor, and frequently the roles overlap. Like the inventor has designed their product and then they build their prototype. So the designer inventor roles are very close together. Keirsey writes about that in Please Understand Me Too and in Personology. And then the next role within the strategic, and then you've got two directive roles, coordinating roles. So the INTJ is good at a range of contingencies. So this is having the foresight to see where things can go wrong in a complicated plan. So contingency planning. And so you can think, okay, this corresponds to extroverted thinking, practical thinking, and intuition of time. So getting the sequence of operations correct towards a long-term strategic objective. And so you can say, okay, INTP can do that. I might not find it as interesting as designing, coming up with theories, like Model V here, or always changing stuff and putting their own spin on stuff. Change for the sake of it. And then the other one. Now this one's furthest away. This is one INTP finds hardest, but it's still within the strategic intellect. Coordinating resources. So intellectually, INTP can do coordinating and CEO kind of stuff. Now then, so I'm going to give you some evidence that INTPs can do TE. This guy, Warren Sandoval, well, he has created a whole business around cognitive type and a website and all of this stuff. Even though it doesn't work brilliantly, he's still done the TE. Linda Behrens married an INTP resembler. She resembles INTP herself. Created a typology business. David Mark Keirsey, out of necessity, created a typology business out of his father's work. Any other ones? Victor himself created a typology business in Ukraine, in not exactly a friendly environment in the 1990s. So, there's some proof that INTPs can do TE. Now, I don't see many INTP cage fighters. Right, so I would make out the case. So I can make a very strong case for the control function being stronger than the brake function. And to think about, so there are these little nuances with Model G that are a little bit too complicated for most people, like the interaction between information and energy. I don't really need to do that in this model, but I will write about it in the positions in these small bits of text. So I'm going to be, what's that? Mention energy information relationship for positions 5 and 3. Right, so role position. Dabbling tertiary. Right, so what I'm going to get to add here is the dabbling tertiary. I'm going to put it right there. Oh no, it moved. Right, like this. Hang on a minute. Low endurance. That's not spelled right. Low endurance. Low endurance. So, find stimulating but eyes bigger than its belly. Right then, so I know an INTP that helped design the modern flying drone. He showed me his designs being used today. Right. Well, yeah, that's the thing, because the roles overlap. And that's one of the things to think about. Type and then role enactment. They are two different things, which is why when we have the private Keirsey events on a Sunday, I will say, no, that's the role, not the type. Right. Because you can have atypical role enactments. David West Keirsey himself was a counsellor. He enacted the counsellor role, but that role is best suited to INFJ. So atypical role enactment. Another thing that happens is atypical role enactment will also change you. So an INTP resembler that enacts the role of counsellor, first of all, they're going to develop better people skills just because of the requirement of the job. So I could show you some model. I'll show you some model V's for other types I've got on this sheet. So valued ones are in green. So you know what type that is. There. You've got all the club functions on the left. So the SF functions on the left. And then it's going to go to this one. ESTP. Yeah, I changed some of these positions recently. I add that home, growth. I can't remember what I called that third one. And then friction pen, some of them. Right, here we go. Yeah. Areas of functional attention. Yes. This goes to a saying from Chris Howard. Let me get this. Your focus determines your reality. So, I am going to give you something from this book. This book, which ripped off someone, because someone told me, Ben, he has ripped off somebody. And it's like, oh, that's right. He did. He ripped off Marie-Louise von Franz. Right. He should have cited his sources. I tried to cite my sources. Right. So the dinner party. This is quite amusing. This is the dinner party, but where is it? Right, the dinner party. The dinner party. Okay. So this is the example of focus of attention. This is the thing called the pub brawl. I've actually probably got this on, but I'll just read it out. An example will help to clarify what Jung meant by these different functions and attitudes. So attitude, avertness. Let us imagine that four people, a sensation type, well actually an instincting type, a thinking type, a feeling type, and an intuiting type, witness the following scene. Right. Two men come staggering out of a bar. They are shouting and swearing at one another. There is a struggle. One of them falls to the ground and bangs his head on the pavement. So, now we've got the witnesses. Ooh, 10 viewers. Each witness will respond to these events in a manner typical of his type. We will take each of them in turn. The sensation type, or instincting type, the sensation type will give the clearest account of what happened. He will have noted the height, build, and general appearance of the two men. One was fat, middle-aged, and bald, and had a scar over his left eye. The other, younger, fair-haired, more athletic, and had a moustache. Both were dressed casually in t-shirts, jeans, and trainers. It was the fat one who fell, and it was his right temple that struck the curb. There was a crack on impact, etc. So there's very few. One of the things to note: adjectives contain value statements, so beware of adjectives. And something that Dario wrote about using TE, sort of avoid in the TE mode, avoiding. That was in 8 keys about avoiding adjectives because the value statements can be used. So, for instance, in the news, you'll hear The government is making savage cuts. Savage cuts. Oh, your values just came out. We still need to put savage in. Right. So, or someone else might say, the government is making smart cuts. Right. And then McKee, because I've been reading his dialogue book, says that the nouns and verbs that someone uses will convey their level of knowledge, and then the verbs and modals that they use will convey their sort of like personality and attitude. Anyway, doing the sensation type, going towards the facts, the sensation type. Now the thinking type is then going to interpret these facts. The thinking type interprets the events as they happen, working out what it all means. The two men come staggering out of the bar, so evidently they have been drinking. They are shouting and swearing at one another, so they are having a disagreement. A struggle ensues, so they must feel strongly enough to become physically violent about it. One falls to the ground, so he must be the weaker or drunker of the two. The latter cracks his head, so he may be concussed and in need of medical attention, etc. Now, I would say that that statement leans towards TI, because there's a lot of like deduction in there. Right. So it's just little things like suppositions like two men come staggering out of a bar, so evidently they have been drinking. And you've got the interpretation going on. Now, the funny one is when they do the intuitive type. So, but in the meanwhile, we've got the feeling type. The feeling type responds to each event in the scene with value judgments. What a sordid episode! What thoroughly objectionable people! That is clearly a bar frequented by louts and not a place to go if one wants a quiet chat with a friend. The one on the ground may have hurt himself, but it serves him right. Now you've got the intuitive type. Now this intuitive type could be like a classic character in a sitcom. The intuitive type sees the whole story. They are football hooligans who support opposing teams. Disgusted by their bad language, the landlord told them to clear off, and this inflamed them to violence. The man who cracked his head is accident prone, and this is just another incident in our lifetime of misfortune. He has fractured his skull, and a clot will form on his brain, requiring surgery. He will be off work for weeks, and his long-suffering wife will once again have to struggle to make ends meet. This is what happens to people from a poor cultural background who have nothing else to live for but football and drink. Seriously, this is in this book. This is not written by me. It's the sort of thing I might write. Things like this will go on happening and get much worse because we do nothing to change society or improve the educational system, etc. So again, focus of attention. So this gets back to the idea of your default field of consciousness. You are in a state of introversion. But what do we mean by a state of introversion? It's yourself in the world. You're not focused on the world, you're focused on yourself in the world, your subjective reaction to the world. So it's the subjective factor. And it's a subjective state of mind. And then with the FE, not with the FE, with the extraverting default field of consciousness, because you're directed towards the empirical data. So if we think about the experience of the field of consciousness of an FE DOM versus an FI DOM, the FI DOM's field of consciousness is going to be their subjective reaction to the subjective feeling interpretation of everything that's going around them, what they feel about everyone and everything, and how that accords with their own system of values. And this is going to be more the case with INFP than ISFP, because ISFP is more situational and any polar, So they want to separate situations out as well. And INFP has got this sort of like moral map, ethical map of the world. It's from the NLP thing of like everyone's got their own mental maps. So the subjective judging, TI is also subjective judging, but so that the subjectivity is there with FI. With FE, it is the attention to all of the emotions from people, the ability to change the emotions in other people and the atmosphere, and all of the sort of like social conventions and manners that is sort of focused on. And it's focused on in such a natural way that it's not, they don't have to like, I'm really focused on this. Like if somebody was like weaker at the function, they have to concentrate on it more, especially when I would say tertiary. But it's effortless, and this is the thing I was going to before with when I was comparing the control function with the brake function, the ignoring with the vulnerable. Well, what I would call it, the allergic with the backseat driver. Why did I call it the backseat driver? Because the backseat driver is, you're the driver. If you're INTP, TI is in the driver, and it's like you've got this voice in the back of your head. It's like you ignore. But sometimes the backseat driver says something good. Do you want to ignore the backseat driver? It depends on the backseat driver. And again, from Dario's book, I can say, can synergize with dominance. So I can give examples of this. If you're an INTP scientist, you are synergizing TI with TE. You're coming up with your hypothesis, you're looking at the patterns in the data, and you're going, okay, I'll come up with this theory. So there's your subjective factor, there's your INTP stuff. Boom, switch to TE, scientific method. Right, I'm going to prove this theory wrong. If you're really proper, honest, I'm going to prove this theory wrong. So this might be one of the reasons why socionics doesn't do a lot of experiments, because they don't exactly want to invalidate their own money-generating theories. So, or any typology. So, design this experiment to prove this hypothesis wrong. You got the TE there. Then you got the analysis of variance and all of the statistics. Okay, that's all TE stuff. So there, in science, TI and TE. And when I asked Julia about it, she thinks there's a lot of ST stuff in science as well. So there you can see synergizes. And again, just trying to get the right words. Initially, I put integrate. I was going to put, I put there, like, it's when I put there, can synergize with dominant. I put there, can synergize with dominant. Originally, I put, not for long, can integrate into dominant. I thought, hang on a minute, then you actually lose the distinction between the function, but no, it's synergize with dominant. I'm going to give another one, another example. Let's just zoom out a little bit. So we've got TI, INTP, and what else is another synergy? Contrarian alternative. FI. TI with FI. Yeah. I can give examples of how I use it. I don't know how. Okay. It depends what the subjective thinking is about. Whether FI would be relevant to it. An INTP could be thinking about, say, a law thing, or say an economic thing, and oh, does that feel right? In writing, you can have a joke where it's like, ooh, it doesn't feel right. I'm gonna give an example of a joke where I changed the graphic. I changed the graphic. So this is an example of I experience FI. So in the graphic for, oh, my alarm is going off very subtly. Got it on flash mode. Let's, oh, it's going off. It's going off even louder. Right, I'm gonna stop soon. Anyway, so what I did, I put something like, it was something about in the graphic it says, in Victor's profile for EII it says does not like loud compliments, and so I thought, okay, I'll write something about wolf whistles. Then I found out this thing about France with the fine, and then I added this line. They probably came out with this so that INFP females would feel safe to be outside. So I thought, okay, that's quite fun. But then there was a little tinge of like, oh, it's not quite right. It's a little bit, ooh, it's a little bit, ooh. So eventually, I removed it. It's like these little fine grade. Oh, I don't know. What is it saying? So I removed it and rewrote it. So you get these little nuanced, like ambivalent. Plus, add some feedback. it's like, are you saying that only INFP females don't like wolf whistles? So it's like, So again, this is where FI role would come in. But then that was like not a good. A better example would be, that's where it came in passively. In like, I didn't actually go there to think about it, although I should have. Now, when I wrote, say, soliloquies in this, and so Wilma is a religious character, and so like she's praying, and so she's in this state, and it's like, to write that character in that position, you have to think as that character thinks. So TI, and here's something else I'm going to talk about in future, subfunctions. So the imaginative subfunction of TI, and the imaginative subfunction of FI being imagining what somebody else feels in that position as that person. That's imaginative subfunction of FI. I'll give you some other subfunctions. The assertive subfunction of FI is all the ethical stuff, and especially like you assert, no, this is right, right from your own, you are asserting it. The imaginative subfunction of FI is, again, vicarious stuff, feel what somebody else is very useful in creative writing. The normalizing FI is, I would say, the ethics of relation stuff, and like how you feel about somebody and the status of a relationship. And the harmonizing would be sort of like bringing different values into harmony. Right, so I'm going to end soon and do some more, unless there's some questions here. Both of those are FI. Yes, they are. Yes, they are both of FI, because they're subfunctions of FI. Who are you, Genesis? Please. Go on, Genesis. Any more questions? I'm prepared to extend for 10 minutes. I'm going to adjust my timer. Claire. That's not right. Any questions, Genesis? Yeah, FI subfunctions. I can't remember what I wrote. I'm going to have to go to the... I'm going to go to the... I've got the JFEC file out. Writer. What did I put? There's values into harmony. I got that when I did a video with Jonathan, where we, Jonathan typed Leon Sao, that's type tips, and he actually came out as Enneagram 9. And so with him, he does a lot of like bringing. That would be an example of it as well, like where you've got these like ambivalent feelings and bring them into harmony. So FI subfunctions. Where are they? Right. Oh, I got it wrong. Right, yeah, I've put ethics of relations on the normal FI. Right, okay. So the way I've done it like this. So subfunctions of FI. Subjective, so if this is for the assertive FI. Subjective idiosyncratic ethics, I'm right, being prepared to stay true to self, even if it means going against the social grain. Delta NFs tend to be collectivist, gamma SFs tend to be individualist, Keirsey temperament matters. So it's like, that's where you're asserting it. Imaginative FI, art, especially putting oneself into the character, into the center of a character, as that character, not as oneself in that position, i.e. feeling as that character feels. Normalizing FI, empathy. And I put here, there are other kinds of empathy, e.g. cognitive, read up on different kinds. Correctly, and then harmonizing, ethics of relations, psychological distance and connection, values into harmony, and I put there could be any as well, because any is involved in bringing different viewpoints into harmony. Right, which helps to understand why all the NPs are informal. Anyway, so I've done subfunctions for all the type. Here we go, Genesis. Oh! Oh! Imagining what the other person thinks and what the other person feels about FI. Hang on a minute. But it's within the realm of thought. Okay, if it's their thoughts about the state that they're in, if it's thoughts about the emotional state that they're in, then yes. But if you are putting yourself in the center of the character and they've got a particular worldview, then I might say, this is where we get an intertwine of thinking and feeling, and this is where we go towards CBT, where and I would then go over to the cognitive behavioral therapy model of the relationship between thinking and feeling, where you've got thinking changes your feeling and your feeling changes your thinking. CBT is a very like INTP model of trying to understand emotions and feelings. So you got they got their ABC model, activating event, and then you got beliefs, and then you got consequences. But the beliefs is split up into like ARD-BIM, attitudes, rules, demands, beliefs, images. BIM, what's the M? I forgot what M, meanings, and then the consequences of sort of like healthy emotions, unhealthy emotions, physical sensations, actions, the behaviors that sort of undercut and reinforce, and so all of these things affect each other. Galenka's cognitive styles. Yes, I know them. Yes, they are interesting. Holographic panoramic for the it's on the supervision rings. Yeah, I've looked into the cognitive styles. But who is this Genesis person? Now, imagine what the other person thinks and the other person feels about FI. Yes, that's FI. But again, imagine what the other person thinks. Again, it would depend on the situation. It's FI if retro gamer Alex. If it's imagining, it's FI if it leads you to what that person thinks based on their feelings in that situation. Then you can, but you could also have a situation where where you put a character in a position which is like a cognitive thing and not an emotional thing, and the way that character reacts is sort of based on their knowledge base, and I'll argue that goes more towards thinking, because it's not always putting yourself in the center of a character for say a very emotional soliloquy of someone realizing that they love someone that they shouldn't, which is in my play. So, right. Yeah, but there you're putting a lot of feeling into thought. Then, I mean, what about if you put yourself in the center of a character and that character comes up with an innovative solution? You see, I don't think it's easy. It's easy to undivide it. It's all mixed up, I think, at that point. Right, I can give you an example where you're definitely right. Okay, so if you put yourself in the center of a character and this character is grieving, and you know the situation, and their thoughts are determined by their complex feeling states, then yes. But I got one for you. Write an ESTP character that's not in an FI state, and this ESTP character is in a state of flexibility in doing whatever is, and their first instinct is to do what works and then what's legal or they can get away with. And then you're putting yourself in the center of a character of sort of maximum sort of utilitarianism, and again you're putting yourself into a thinky state, but that is very tricky because it's a blend. I think though there's certain like cognitive empathy things that, like, you see it in typology, that there are like ENTPs and ESTPs that can sort of like get a theory of mind of somebody through typology and have an idea what somebody is thinking without actually feeling it, because their FI is not good enough to put themselves in somebody else's position, but they can have sort of a cognitive theory of mind. Right. Like, Alex has a very particular writing style. Well, I believe FI is born out of the panoply of emotions which bubble up through the instincts, which gain self-awareness through habit. Okay. FI is born out of the panoply of emotions. Okay. One thing I wrote about, oh, right, I got a little thing. So, I recently did a video with Sana, and she was saying, oh, that I had the definitions of feeling and emotion the wrong way around. Well, not necessarily. Because you've also got, I was looking it up, you've got like, here's a pretty good one, is like feeling being the subjective experience of emotions. Panoply, yes, panoply of emotions. With another thing, it's very tricky to, but there's not these neat dividing lines in the brain, because the brain evolved and it started as more of an emotional thing. Yeah, the ear tends to be terrible. Well, I agree. I'm just saying that they can have a sort of a theory of mind, at least, and they at least sort of what they would tend to do is put themselves in that person's position as them in that position, not as that other person. Anyway, yeah. Look. Right, Genesis. Right. So, Genesis, are you a member of any of my Facebook groups? Right. Right. Okay. So I'll say something about instinct then. Actually, yeah, I want to give you my subfunctions of SI. And subfunctions helps to, I think these are all subfunctions of SI, which is why I've added them here. And it helps with trying to understand why the systems have different definitions of SI. So here we go. I'll climax with this. So if someone is using SI assertively, I'm going to call that the assertive subfunction of SI. So you stabilize them to what works in the past, make regular, schedule, doing this to others, impress upon them to be reliable, regular. Logistics, supplying and supervising. The thing is here though, supplying and supervising is with, it's blocked with other functions. But the leadership style is stabilizer. So it's like you're putting it on other people. You stabilizing leadership style. So there's also different types are going to use different functions, different subfunctions in different ways. Wait a minute, Genesis. I will answer that in a moment. So if you look at extroverted sensor, ESTJ will use the assertive subfunction of extroverted sensor. And that I put the force sensorics under assertive extroverted sensor. How does ISFJ, KBN ISFJ, accommodator guardian use extroverted sensor? Well, they're not being assertive like that. So they're not using the assertive subfunction of extroverted sensing, but they can immerse themselves in the present context. They can adapt to circumstances, so they can use the normalizing and harmonizing subfunctions of extroverted sensor. Imaginative SI, subjective sensation instinct, sensory imagination affected by past personal experience, related to beauties in the eye of the beholder. And then I'll put a note here, compare SI to qualia. And then I'll put a note here, many imaginative guardians are frequently uncreative because they see the arts as too risky a career. Also, the temperament goes to what has already been created, either conventional. So guardians are likely to be derivative stroke classical. ISFP with its implementer SI is more likely than ISFJ to use imaginative SI to create art. But I know of 2 or 3 ISFJ resemblers who write poetry. But again, it's not something that they're going to do professionally as much. And then normalizing SI. Again, this is within model Vaserlan. Habits, routine, orthodoxy. And I put here tricky because of super id NE. Well, not super id, Bside NE. Harmonizing, and that's where I put comfort sensor. I put comfort sensing under harmonizing SI. Anyway, so JP switch. Right. Anyhow, let's get this for everybody. Hurry up. JP switch. Okay, my current thoughts on JP switch. I think you can do them. Okay, so JP switch. I think you can convert. I've compared. I don't know about the MBTI types. I've compared the Keirsey types line by line with the Glenker Model G types. The intuitive types, in my opinion, translate across well. So, for example, NFJs in Keirsey, the directive, and they go towards these directive roles of mentor, educator, and mentor counselor. Victor's name for EIE is mentor. Yes, he calls his IEI lyric, but Keirsey also writes about that type, apart from counseling, can also be creative. And it's directive. And if you look at Keirsey's INFJ profile, it's like extrasensory perception. He wrote, most likely of all the types to show foreknowledge, extrasensory connection, all the NI stuff, it's all there. And I'm going to show it on screen. So I have compared them all. The sensory introverts don't translate over in general. ISFJ is about, SEI is about 80%. But you see, the thing is, SEI varies by subtype. Normalizing SEI is like Keirsey ISFJ. Keirsey ISFP doesn't really exist in socionics. So if you're a Keirsey ISFP, you might get typed as IEI so what I'm going to do, so yeah, I don't have those. I am going to go now, and there'll be another episode.